Welcome back to the show, everyone. Of course, so many stories of heroism from the greatest generation are now being lost just due to the passing of that generation. And it's beautiful when you see a story that incorporates the heroic journey of just some of the people that sacrificed so much for our country.
And there's a great documentary you can see March 17th at the Van City Theatre called Ayaa, A Hero's Journey. And joining us now to tell us more about it is Marilyn Thomas. She's the producer and writer, along with Jason Margolis, who is the director. How are you both?
Hi, guys. How are you? Thank you for joining us. So, Marilyn, let's start with you because this has a very personal aspect for you.
Yes.
Tell us about the film and how this all got started for you.
It's actually about my great uncle, and I heard the story quite a few years ago, and then over the last 4 years, he actually said, I want you to tell the story. And about 4 years ago, actually Jason's been on since the beginning, and yeah, we just decided, I tried doing it as a short film, I tried doing it as a fictional story, and then
it works so
organically
well
came as a documentary.
It works so well in the format that you guys did. It's a very, very touching story, and I'm sure as a director you must have a huge amount of responsibility to take on that story. Maybe you guys can tell us what that story is.
Oh, it's a story of miracles. It's a story about how Al Thomas, Marilyn's great uncle, saved a young girl during World War II, and then by sheer coincidence or fate, he wound up being her neighbor in Canada 60 years later.
Isn't that incredible?
Marilyn, the first time you heard this story from your great uncle or from whichever family member, what was your reaction? I mean, it's almost unbelievable when you see it unwind on film.
Well, that's almost one of the first reactions. It's actually funny that it's a documentary, and the first reaction I get from a lot of people is it real?
Yeah.
And I think that's just a general thing. And when you see the film, you get a really good sense of who my uncle is, and that he's a bit of a, I'll say, storyteller. And so you never know.
He's really funny too. I mean, that's the other great part. He's got a great sense of humor.
Yeah, and you never know if he's telling the truth or not, or if it's like all part of some joke. And so
So you didn't know whether he was pulling your leg or whether it's sort of.
How did he tell this, or how did he find out? First of all, these two became neighbors in Chase, BC, by complete coincidence. But how did they figure out that she was indeed the little girl that he helped in the war?
Well, what they said to me was that they were sitting down having tea. They lived on the river and
just being neighborly.
Yeah, just being neighborly, just chatting. And she said, "Well, you know, you were in the war. Did you ever go to Holland?" And he said, "Yeah." And
check.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, "Have you ever been to Groesbeek?" And my Dutch accent is awful, but and she was like, "Yeah, well, that's where a Native Canadian soldier saved my life." And then that kind of struck him as, you know, a bit odd. And then he was like, "Okay," and then started asking her questions, and all of a sudden he realized that that was the same little girl because
he had scooped up and saved.
Yeah. And Jason, the way you told this story through the film, it was a really interesting mix of, we have the uncle telling the story from his words. Of course, we have the little girl now in her world. Of course, she's suffering from Alzheimer's, so it makes the story have just one more layer, how stories can be forgotten in many ways. But maybe you can explain as a director how you decided to weave that together with archival footage and to tell it, because it's very, very complicated to put that all in such a short amount of time.
It is. It's a historical piece, but we didn't have the biggest budget, so we couldn't do all sorts of World War II recreations. So we had to figure out a way of playing with that, and we used the fact that Annika's having memory issues as part of that.
She's a little girl.
Annika's a little girl.
Now
She's in her late 60s, early 70s. And we kind of created a tapestry that is reflective of the fact that she's struggling to remember things. She doesn't quite even remember Al at this point when we were filming. And Al even has his own memory issues.
Yeah.
But when they reconnected a few years ago, they remembered it vividly. And so we had letters from Annika where she retold the story, and we had someone narrate those letters, and we went to the real place where it happened. And
her family, and you get the story from them. And this all wraps up into other issues with your uncle's service in World War II as well, and the story of so many Aboriginal Canadians and First Nations people, and their struggle to just do basic things for the country as they went. How does that all work into everything as it goes?
Well, the one thing I really wanted to emphasize is that even though my uncle did have these struggles, that it really was the heart of the story that mattered, and we didn't want to focus too much on those things, but we still wanted to kind of, you know, make
point.
mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Remind people
Yes.
for very good
Yeah.
reasons.
Well, let's
as
have a look at a clip right now. You will be able to see the film in its entirety March 17th at the Van City Theatre, but here is a clip from Ayaa, A Hero's Journey.
And I tried to get into the Air Force, and they said, well, we're not recruiting right now. So I went and tried to join the Army. This officer behind the disc says, one of your parents got to be white. And my brothers were in already. My father was a Cree native, and my mother was a Ojibwe. But my father had Welsh blood in him, and my mother had a lot of French in her. So I said, okay. I said, my mother was French, and my dad was Englishman. And that's the way I got in.
Like so many Native veterans, Al's heroism has gone largely unrecognized by his government. But the people of Chase understand. And in 2002, fate brought Al a unique reward.
All right, quick correction. It's March 7th at the Van City Theatre if you want to check it out. It's an amazing documentary. What is it like for you to see your family's reaction to a story so close to you to be told?
Have they seen it yet, your family?
Most of my family has. My uncle actually was sick while we were in post, so we basically tried to rush to a finish to make sure that he got to see it. And then most of my family has seen it. I actually played it at the Chase Legion, where we filmed some of it, and that was a very interesting reaction because it's very nerve-wracking showing a film to not only your family. It was the first time my mom had seen it.
And to just feel their reaction.
And have the reaction of the
Yeah.
people who know these people, because that's really
Intimate.
Jason, were you there for that?
I didn't get to go to that screening.
Chicken! I love it. Well, and obviously the reaction would have been marvelous because this is just a beautiful story and a great reflection of just a wonderful man. And
Congrats, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
great, you guys.
Just
nicely
pays to
done.
talk to your neighbors.
Yeah, does it ever?
It
Yeah.
does.
And your
A
family.
Hero's Journey, once again, will air March 7th at the Van City Theatre. Make sure that you check it out. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
We appreciate it. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about something very cool. It's called boudoir photography. And if you want to feel sexy and maybe present a very special gift,
Don't worry,
for
you guys
someone
don't
in
have to
your
do
life.
it.
Yes, that's right. And you two will be our models. We'll be right back with that. Kathy Empey after this.